Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Maya Nye, and I'm mostly a lifelong resident of the Kanawha Valley, and I'm the Executive Director of People Concerned About Chemical Safety here in West Virginia. And one of the reasons why is because our communities have not been adequately protected from chemical releases for basically my entire life. Chemical industry put food on my table. I also worked in the chemical industry, so I understand the importance of economic development in this state. But like I said, chemical releases have not been adequately, they haven't been adequately protected here in the valley, particularly. Some things that I really want to highlight is that 423 does not classify tanks based on scientific data. There are a number of chemicals that are stored in the tanks that are talked about in this bill that have not even been adequately tested for human consumption. And we learned that last year. 300,000 people were the guinea pigs for that. So it seems to me that scientific data should really be in play here when we're talking about exemptions. It fails to regulate the bulk of the tanks in this valley, because I know that a number of process vessels were completely exempted from the original bill. I know 14 people who specifically left this area, them and their children, middle-aged, tax-paying citizens who left specifically because of the water crisis. So I would just ask you to take these things into consideration and to take into consideration that the freedom tanks would be regulated under this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nye. Doug Douglas, followed by Nancy Ward.
Good morning. My name is Doug Douglas. I work for a small, independent, family-owned oil and gas producer in West Virginia. We are a West Virginia company with West Virginia employees that uses West Virginia water, so we cherish that just as much as anyone else. One of the major misconceptions I think that came about in the legislation passed last year that still may apply is that oil and gas tanks are not regulated. But the fact is that since 1973 under the EPA, there's been spill prevention, control, and countermeasure programs that have been in place, SPCC for short. That program focuses on adequate containment in case of breaches rather than tank integrity. Its purpose is to prevent spills from breaching waters that may cause damage or ill effects. So the purpose of this bill, led to last year's legislation to protect the waters, is already in place with programs that oil and gas producers have to follow. Look at the track record. There's not been one catastrophic incident with a water situation from an oil and gas tank with over 47,000 located in the state. I'll wrap up here. In closing, we all want to protect our water. We live here, like I said, as do the families. The sheer number of tanks in the state make it hard for DEP to regulate this. But why punish an industry that has existing standards to protect the public? We just want reasonable regulation of our industry and the use of a risk-based approach with unnecessary costs. Senate Bill 423, although still burdensome, is an improvement from last year. We ask that you see passage of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Nancy Ward, followed by Eddie. Richard, I think you are.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Ward. I'm a Charleston business owner and co-founder of the West Virginia Sustainable Business Council. After 28 years in business, this freedom industry spill almost put us under. Some businesses did close, and others who were considering West Virginia as a place to do business decided it was just too risky to locate here. I've attended several stakeholder meetings and took part in the meetings held over the summer where the DEP, industry, and business leaders met to discuss the rules the DEP were crafting. The complaints from tank owners were being addressed in a fair and reasonable manner, and it was shown that wild rumors of huge costs for inspections were unfounded. As a business owner, there are fees and taxes that we are forced to pay. We don't like it. It hurts our bottom line. The 1% added sales tax that was added this year in the city of Charleston hurts my business, but I have to collect it. The city needs the money, and even though it's going to direct people to the internet to avoid the added expense, we have to collect it. The added expense of inspections is going to cost tank owners more money. I understand that, but it will not be overly burdensome. The fact is we need those inspections to guarantee safe, clean water for our citizens, my family, and my customers. Industry's right to do business ends when it interferes with my right to do business and when it affects my family's health. When you vote to protect business and jobs, please protect my business, my As written, Senate Bill 423 does not adequately protect our water from leaking tanks.
Ms. Ward, please wrap up your comments.
Thank you. I'm asking you to vote no on Senate Bill 423. Give 373 a chance to work. Let the DEP do their job and make sure they have the funding they need to implement the rules they worked so hard to craft for Senate Bill 373. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Eddie Rivard, followed by Tom Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Betty Rivard. I'm a resident of Braxton County, and I also have an apartment in Charleston. I just want to make 2 points. First, the water made me sick, and it still does. And it seemed, and still seems like no one cares. The only side benefit that I need to admit is that it makes my hair shinier. Second, this is not a partisan issue. It's an oil and gas and coal issue. The representatives of those industries fought the law last year, and they're still fighting it. The only senator who voted against gutting it this year is a Republican. The 3 Democrats who represent my district are all leading the charge to protect oil and gas instead of protecting my friends and neighbors and me. I can't understand why they think that's okay. It is not what I voted for them to do, and I don't believe that my neighbors would support that either. The DEP is able to accommodate oil and gas and other interests within the law and proposed regulations, and they need to continue to be allowed to do that. Why compromise? I ask the committee to oppose this law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivard. Tom Boggs, followed by Ida Shepherd.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tom Boggs, and I'm with the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. And I would speak in support of the committee substitute for Senate Bill 423 that recently passed the state Senate with a bipartisan vote. I would submit that 423 is a natural maturation of any extensive regulatory program. And it is a continuation of the process to get it right. It is a work product of a group of stakeholders that included representatives from the public, the DEP, regulated community, and elected officials, with giving due consideration to the desire to maintain a safe and high-quality water supply while taking into account what industry needs to meet the regulations. We feel that 423 is an improvement to last year's bill, the above-ground storage tank, and should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boggs. Ida Shepherd, followed by Rick Wilson. I might see our representative from Wilson. You see that light come on? Let's wrap up your comments by here's Tom.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I have to say it's feeling a little bit like Groundhog Day. I'm not talking about the weather. My name is Ida Shepherd. I'm from the American Friends Service Committee, and I'm here actually to share some remarks from Destiny Gallagher from Drawdy in Boone County. She was here at this very podium last year in a public hearing when we were considering how we're going to protect our water. And so I'm here to read her remarks as she's now 16 years old, and she couldn't be here this morning, so I'm here to share what she says. When I first had heard about these rollbacks to water protection laws, I was deeply upset. Last year, we, United, worked extremely hard to get these protection laws in effect, and now here we are again. How could our legislature for 1 minute even think about putting what companies want before the safety of West Virginians? Clean water is essential for businesses, for raising a family, and for the natural beauty of streams and rivers here in West Virginia. Also, I had a thought, wouldn't more inspections create jobs, and shouldn't almost every law we consider create jobs, and at the very least keep people safe? Don't you want to, and Finally, I'll skip to the end. Finally, what are lawmakers expecting of me and the next generation? Don't you want to leave us with clean water so we can raise our family here and make West Virginia more prosperous and sustainable for years to come? Please oppose Senate Bill 423. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Rick Wilson, followed by Jeff Eisner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Due to weather, a lot of people couldn't be here today. I've been asked to read a statement from the League of Women Voters, of which I'm a member. According to the League of Women Voters supported Senate Bill 373 because it made every effort to protect the waters of our state from another above-ground storage tank spill. They urged the legislature not to weaken SB 373 protections. SB 423, under its current form, exempts far too many tanks from regulation, many of which are located within 1,000 feet of a river or stream. While many tanks don't need to be regulated, they believe that the DEP rules should be the basis of any amendments. Certainly tanks that failed last year's inspection should be included in the regulatory procedures. The League also supports the annual inspections of those tanks near water intakes. One of the lessons from last year's bill is that water utilities need to prepare plans both to prevent disasters and respond. SB 373 included provisions for such planning and must ensure water utilities and disaster response agencies have the information they need on stored chemicals in above-ground tanks. I'll hand over the rest of the statement.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Tim Sayer, followed by Jeff Eisner.
I was born and raised in West Virginia. I have children and grandchildren that live in this state. Do you even remember what it was like this time last year? I was scared to death to eat out anywhere, even wash my hands when I went to Charlotte. I had a friend who lost a baby about this time, and another who was still suffering rashes and burning in his eyes when he showered. I lived in St. Albans at the time, and my grandbabies were in Point Pleasant, so they were safe. I opened my home to all my friends so they could come over and bathe and get drinking water. It was a mess, but we pulled together and we got through. We also passed a law that would help make sure it doesn't happen again. And now you want to gut this law and exempt over 36,000 tanks. This is unacceptable. I will not allow it, and like it or not, you work for me. I am representing all of the citizens who cannot be here today to tell you these things. They don't all just live right down the street like I do, and they can't all just show up in the aftermath of a snowstorm and a flood of epic proportions. So I am here for them. We didn't trust you then, and we sure as heck don't trust you now. I don't know why we bother to pass laws to protect the environment in West Virginia anymore. You just allow them to be circumvented whenever the money comes from the right people, or even better, sue the EPA. But we passed one, a good one that the people need, and now you're trying to nullify it. We need leaders in this building, not politicians. Which one of you will step up and take the lead? It stops now. You need to realize that I'm not joking when I say I represent all of West Virginia. It is insane that I have to stand here asking you this, but here goes. Scrap this bill, this 343. You drink water too.
Jeff Eisner, followed by Linda Frame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Eisner. I am the founder and CEO of Elk River Energy. I live 3 miles from Freedom Industry Spill. I think I have a unique perspective for this issue. My son was born 2 weeks after the spill at Women's and Children's Hospital in Charleston. It was a really tough time for our family with the spill. As a consumer, I understand the importance of protecting our water. We couldn't give him a bath for roughly a month after he was born. Fast forward to today, as the owner of Elk River Energy, the regulations that were passed last year to oil and gas operators in this state make it difficult for us to comply and to pay our bills. I'm in favor of Senate Bill 423, and I would ask that you would consider these comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eisner. Linda Frame, followed by Father Brian O'Donnell.
Good morning. Thank you for the chance to speak today against this bill. My name is Linda Frame. I live in Charleston, and I've raised my children here. This water crisis affected all of us. It didn't matter where we lived. It didn't matter who we worked for. It didn't matter who we lobbied for, and it didn't matter who signed our paychecks. That is why it's hard for me to wrap my mind around the idea that we are considering rolling back all the protections we put in place last year. This crisis has affected my family. My grandmother, my children's grandmother, will not come to town to visit them. My son asked her, "Are you coming for my college graduation?" She said, "I will be here. However, I cannot stay in Charleston." So she will be spending her money to live in Barbersville instead of coming to Charleston. If SB 423 passes, the message we will send is that industry wins again. The public outcry from last year is now forgotten, and protecting our water was simply a fleeting exercise done while so many were suffering and watching, and even the nation's eyes were upon us. Please consider the personal pleas you are hearing today for sanity as you consider this bill. Passing it will send a strong message about our priorities as a state and taking care of the people who live here. Please oppose this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Frame. Father Brian O'Donnell, followed by Corky DeMarco.
I'm Brian O'Donnell of the Catholic Conference of West Virginia. Worldwide, the Catholic Church is very strong on access to clean water as an inalienable human right. Normally, when this is discussed in the Catholic Church, we're thinking about our sisters and brothers in the third world who have a terrible time getting clean water day to day. In the context at first, I'd say any attempt to weaken protections for clean water should be dealt with very conservatively and cautiously. For instance, there's talk about different zones of concern. It seems to me polluted water from any zone flows downhill. Eventually, it's going to be of concern to somebody in a big way. I really hope that this body will take a very, very careful look at this law and bear in mind we're talking about a God-given right to clean water here. Thank you.
Thank you, Father O'Donnell. Corky DeMarco, followed by Jeffrey Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dave Yowsey, and I'm here for Corky DeMarco, the Executive Director of the West Virginia Oil and Natural Gas Association, to offer these comments. The requirements of the Oil and Gas Acts that govern our tanks are extensive and provide protections against unexpected releases. The contents of our tanks, brine and oil, are largely innocuous. Senate Bill 423 recognizes these important facts. Senate Bill 373 did not. Freedom Industries was an outlier and was not representative of the effective standards and secondary containment found in our industry. We have protected the waters of this state under current law, and Senate Bill 423 requires us to continue those protections. We urge you to support Senate Bill 423. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Allen, followed by Jerry Burns.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Allen, and I am the Executive Director of the West Virginia Council of Churches and the United Methodist Pastor. It is important to remember who and what Senate Bill 373 was about. Senate Bill 373 was about my neighbor who was pregnant at the time of the chemical spill. It was about the children who lost access to breakfast and lunch because school was canceled. Senate Bill 373 was about waiters and waitresses, barbers and hairdressers who lost wages because restaurants were closed and you couldn't use the water. It was about the estimated $61 million in damage to our West Virginia economy. And Senate Bill 373 was about compromise and the promise of government to provide for the public welfare. Senate Bill 373 was about the fact that West Virginia is one state, and when one part of the state hurts, we all hurt. For the sake of the people of West Virginia, let us keep the standards set by Senate Bill 373. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Jerry Burns, followed by John Vineyard.
Hi, my name is Jay Burns, and I own a catering business here in Charleston, West Virginia, and I'm also the co-founder of the West Virginia Sustainable Business Council. Our council came together after the water crisis because we found that large industry had a big voice and small businesses didn't. I'd like to remind this body that an estimated $61 million was lost during the 1 week of the Do Not Use order. And to me, that's a big bunch of money. Another big bunch of money was the $4,000 that my business personally lost over 1 weekend because we were shut down. While I don't employ hundreds of people in an industry that doesn't want to be regulated, I employ a handful of people who are like family to me. And when they don't work, they don't make money. And I watch them struggle to pay their bills, and I also watch other friends who are in small businesses struggle to pay their bills. And that is very, very personal to me. I have stood here last year talking to this body about the importance of protecting our water. I have worked over the past year in stakeholder meetings to make sure that our waters are still protected. In my opinion, 423 is just an effort on behalf of business to gut Bill 373. I ask this body to let the process work and to kill 423. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. John Vineyard, followed by Vicki Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Jan Vineyard, and I represent the Marketers and Grocers Association, the West Virginia Trucking Association. I rise in support of Senate Bill 423. This bill protects the environment and will allow DEP to focus on the tanks that have the biggest threat to our drinking water. As the bill passed last year, DEP would be spread so thin that they would not be able to spend the time on those that do have the threat. It also placed further regulations on tanks that were already regulated. We are regulated through the Fire Commission, we are regulated through the EPA, we are regulated through DEP through numerous permits and plans. DEP will still know under this bill where our tanks are and what they have. They will still have to approve our plans and permits. I urge passage of the bill, which all the stakeholders were at the table at in the Senate as it came out at 33-1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vineyard. My apologies. Vicki Wolf, followed by Angie Rosser.
Hi, I'm Vicki Wolf with the West Virginia Environmental Council, and the first thing I want to do is express my disappointment that we're having to go through this all over again just 1 year later. After all the stories that were told at last year's public hearing and all the pleading for adequate water protection and how hard everyone worked on that bill, which passed unanimously. Secondly, I don't think anyone is opposed to eliminating duplicative regulation as long as what's in place is as protective as what was passed last year. But this bill goes way beyond that. The best approach would have been simply to eliminate any duplicative regulation while ensuring in statute that the regulation remained as protective and then give Senate Bill 373 a chance to work. It has been only a year. If 423 is passed, another year will go by without above-ground storage tank regulations in place, other than the initial registration, initial spill plans, and initial inspections. DEP's proposed AST rule has been developed with extensive input from both industry and citizens, and all that effort will have been wasted. The process will have to start all over. So I urge you to reject 423, or if not that, please amendment so that the adequate protections that were in last year's 373 remain in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Angie Rosser, followed by Jason Mosca.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Angie Rosser with the West Virginia Rivers Coalition, and I'm entrusted by our members who love the state and love to play and drink and live in a state with clean and healthy rivers that are safe. Our organization has been heavily involved since last year, providing research analysis to this body to inform decision making. And I've been involved with several meetings with the industry and gaining a clearer understanding of their concerns, which we feel have been addressed in the risk-based approach of the DEP rule that has yet to see the light of day in this body, and I'm not sure why. The rule has been ignored. The safety net provisions that we offered through the stakeholder process were largely ignored. So we have to stand here today not in support of Senate Bill 423. We cannot support legislation that restricts information to the public about the threats to our water supply. We cannot support a bill that weakens inspections. And this is really about public trust. Inspections are essential to public trust. Because I believe that most of the industry and the tank owners represented here today are doing a good job. We just need to see that you're doing a good job. And when you do a good job, you deserve our respect. So please afford us that assurance. And we ask to please have this committee take a hard look at this rule. There are important things to consider over the months and thousands of hours that went into that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosser. Jason Boston, followed by Rick Eads.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Jason Boston with the West Virginia Bowl Association, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning regarding Senate Bill 423. During the legislature's debate and consideration of the tank bill last year, one of the consistent concerns voiced not only by the coal industry, but by other regulated sectors as well, was for the need for the legislature and the agency to acknowledge existing statutes and regulatory programs when crafting an entirely new regulatory program specifically for tanks. As we said many times last year, when one regulatory program conflicts with another, rarely is either program successful. Tanks located on coal mining operations have been subject to regulation under the West Virginia Groundwater Protection Act since its passage by the legislature in 1993. The EPA mandates the preparation of groundwater protection plans, which include identifying all substances stored in any facility, container and tank size, the development of spill prevention and response plans, and secondary containment for any substance with the potential to impact surface and groundwater. The legislation before the committee recognizes that tanks used by specific industry segments such as coal mining are already regulated, and that these industry segments have entire divisions of trained inspectors and permit review technicians dedicated to their effective regulation. By allowing these existing regulatory programs and standards for tanks and secondary containment to be revised to include provisions related to tank integrity, Senate Bill 423 presents an opportunity for reasonable regulation that protects public water resources and public water entities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Boston. Rick Eads, followed by David Haney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Eads, I'm a teacher, and in a short lesson, I'll take you back to 1988. We've heard about too many regulations and redundant regulations. In 1988, we introduced the underground storage tank program in this country under Robert Reagan. Heavily endorsed, bipartisan. We went out and cleaned up 490,000 leaking tank sites. George Herbert Walker Bush strongly endorsed it. This was totally bipartisan. It was a different era. Yes, we had 1973 spill prevention laws. Yes, we had other laws, but we recognized we had a risk. As tanks age, they do not get better. As tanks age, public welfare is at risk. As tanks age, corrosion occurs. We work with chemical engineers throughout. I worked in this industry with 22 different state regulatory agencies after representing industry in emergency responses all over New England, cleaning up leaking tanks. Obviously, Freedom Industries corroded their tank, and we can see more of that. We need leak detection. We need 373, and we need to protect the public welfare. We need leadership that has courage, conviction, capacity, not running and hiding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eads.
I am David Haney, President of the Independent Oil and Gas Association of West Virginia. We have over 750 member companies and thousands of employees that live and work in the state of West Virginia. Probably everyone here knows that Senate Bill 373 was passed into law last year as a result of an accident that never should have happened. The law did not provide the DEP enough flexibility to write rules concerning protecting our water, but rather compelled them to include many small oil and gas tanks throughout the state that pose no threat to drinking water, as acknowledged by DEP themselves. The sheer size of this obligation on the DEP to enforce rules on some 48,000 tanks registered creates a serious risk of minimizing their ability to monitor the tanks that are a threat. This should be a concern to every citizen in the state. Senate Bill 423 is not an oil and gas or an industry bill, but will correct a number of unintended consequences that existed in Senate Bill 373. The committee substitutes tighten the bill up substantially to still give the DEP latitude to apply their expertise in determining the real threats to our water supplies. Oil and gas tanks did not and have never caused this sort of problem, and when in compliance with existing state and federal regulations, would never cause this problem. The Freedom Industries tank is in no way similar to oil and gas tanks, but had it been regulated by and compliant with state and federal regulations with which we already comply, this never would have happened. IOTA supports Senate Bill 423 and the committee substitutes. Although IOTA's members believe they should not be a party to this legislation, we do appreciate the relief provided in Senate Bill 423 and will continue to protect the waters of our state, just as we have always proven to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. Eaton Hanson, followed by Joy Gano.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Brunello, and I'm reading on behalf of a citizen of Charleston. My name is Aiden Henson. I am 12 years old and in 7th grade at Stonewall Jackson Middle School in Charleston. I remember the horrible smell when the chemical spill happened. It made me sick to my stomach. I still don't drink the water, and I'm afraid that something like this will happen again. It shouldn't be normal for people to worry about their water. Our drinking water should be safe. After the water crisis, the state legislature passed a law, Senate Bill 373, that requires inspections of storage tanks and water companies to have backup plans in case of an emergency. Some industries want to make the law weaker, but it should stay strong and not be changed. All companies should follow the rules. Like my principal says, meet expectations, no exceptions. Thank you.
Joy Gano, followed by Jim McKinney.
Good morning, my name is Joy Gano. I own Gano Farms LLC in Charleston. It's a 68-year-old company. I would just like to remind everyone how much the citizens of this state suffered last year. I myself personally sustained over a $400,000 loss, which is no small potatoes in my business. The cost of the community was just untold. It really was. We had lost population, we lost in real estate values, and if you weaken this bill, you will not attract any new business into this state. In fact, you will lose more existing businesses than ever, because I know that I cannot operate without potable water. That is just a fact. And another fact is that without clean water, there is no life. And that means in this state also. So I ask every one of you all to stand up for the people of West Virginia and let us have clean water and the assurances that we will have clean water. Because weakening any bill that was passed last year and undermining the hard work is just hatred and corporate sponsorship instead of standing up for the people of the state.
Thank you, Ms. Gano. Jim McKinney, followed by Rebecca Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim McKinney. I work for Intervest. We have about 120 employees in West Virginia. I live and work in downtown Charleston, so business and home and family were all affected by last year's disaster. Senate Bill 423 partially corrects the excess regulations from last year's bill. Oil and gas tanks are and always have been regulated. Federal regulations like the Clean Water Act, the Spill Prevention Control and Countermeasure Act, and state regulations requiring annual inspections of well sites were in place and are in place. Oil and salt water did not cause the problem, and are different substances than what was spilled last year. I urge the passage of the bill that will recognize these differences and correct the costly overregulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Rebecca Roth, followed by Dustin White. Is Rebecca Roth here? Dustin White, would you please move to the podium, the area of the podium, so we can be right on?
Rebecca will be here in just a second, but I've got 2 kids that are getting a little restless, so I'm going to take her spot and send her in as soon as she grabs her daughter, who is also equally restless. But my name is Emily Bennington, and I first want to say that I've always prided myself on being one of the ones who came home. I love this state, and it's been wonderful over the years to be part of working with groups that are working hard to make this state better, from Generation Charleston to Generation West Virginia to Leadership West Virginia and so on. And there's a lot of talk here about what creates jobs, and so I want to give you a sentence or 2 about mine because I think it's relevant to this discussion. I work for myself. As an author and a speaker, the only thing that I need besides myself is a laptop and an airport. In other words, I am one of the hundreds of thousands of professionals who make up the so-called free agent nation. What this means is that I can live anywhere, and I've chosen to live in West Virginia because I'm happy here. I like having dinner at Cafe Semino, I like taking my children to the Clay Center, and in my business, I especially like hiring West Virginia designers, photographers, videographers, accountants, consultants, and so on. And so it's bittersweet to tell you that the next time somebody asks me where I'm from, I'm going to tell them Charlotte, North Carolina. In 2008, when my son Christian was 3 and his brother Liam was 1, my husband and I were watching TV when the windows in our South Hills home shook from the Bear Institute explosion miles away. After that incident, some of our friends left, citing Bear as the last straw in a long list of lax safety in the state. And like so many others, I was more than casually troubled by Bear, but accidents happen, and I pray that that one was a one-off. Cut to last January, when I'm standing in front of a steaming shower that smells like licorice, deciding whether or not to put my children in it or let them go another day without bathing. As time went on, however, it became clear that accidents don't just happen. This one was the result of a chain of poor legal decisions culminated in the disaster we faced. I have 2 more sentences. And so I'm here to ask you for one thing. Please put the safety of the citizens of West Virginia above everything else when voting on this legislation. I know that West Virginia is open for business, but if this bill passes, I will not be the only one taking mine elsewhere. Thank you.
Chris Hamilton, followed by Dustin White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, to address and speak to Senate Bill 423. I'm Chris Hamilton with the West Virginia Business and Industry Council. For the record, we wholeheartedly support SB 423 and would encourage your support as well. For this legislation reportedly makes corrections to the comprehensive legislation passed last year in response to the Freedom Spill. As passed by the Senate, the legislation before us, which received overwhelming bipartisan support, maintains the unprecedented rigid requirements for tanks in zones of critical concern, so precious drinking water supplies remain protected. It also recognizes the AST Act with other statutory programs and requirements that are in place in so many industries that provide for the same or a higher level of protection for drinking water supplies. SB 423 expands and reinforces the critical aspects of the legislation passed last year. It requires all tanks to be registered and allows DEP to maintain a comprehensive inventory of tanks. It also creates a zone of peripheral concern in addition to the zone of critical concern established by the AST Act. Provides many other stringent requirements, and also, as I indicated earlier, reconciles those provisions that are already in place and been existing for years are fully implemented, fully enforced by the West Virginia DEP. Again, I encourage your support for SB 423. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Dustin White, followed by Emmett Pepper.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. It is my understanding that my organization, the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition, has already submitted written comments, so I just have a few additions to add to that. One is that EPA regulations do not cover tank integrity. And two, we will not support any attempts to pass this bill that has compromises. Now, I'm here today also as a citizen of West Virginia, and I'm going to speak for someone who can't be here today. And that person is my father, Teddy White. He is a retired coal miner and a Vietnam veteran. And today is very personal for me because a year ago today, I watched my father take his last painful breath. He spent the last weeks of his life without access to clean water because he was impacted by the MCH chemical spill. I tell everyone in this room, you owe it to my father as a Vietnam veteran and a coal miner to protect our waters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Emmett Pepper, followed by Ms. Roth. Ms. Roth, you want to go next?
I'm Rebecca Roth. I was born and raised in West Virginia and have lived in Charleston for the last 6 years. A year ago at this time, my daughter was not yet 2, and I was pregnant with my son. I went from feeling happy anticipation for what the new year held to being filled with uncertainty and fear for our family's health. The urge to feel that things are back to normal is irresistible, and maybe everything looks normal now. But that's no reason to roll back the progress the legislature made last year, as if the water crisis last year never happened. We need to make sure that the corporations that can impact our water supply are playing by the rules and are being held accountable. We need a renewed commitment by our elected officials to rebuild our water infrastructure. We need regular updates about medical monitoring, the current state of the water, the success rate of the filters, and when we will get more than one source for the water supply that 300,000 of us rely on. Water is the most important resource we have. It's essential to our children's health. We put down roots in this state, but they need water. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roth. Emmett Pepper, followed by Charlie Bird.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emmett Pepper, I'm here on my own behalf, not for my employers. I'm concerned about the optics of this bill. We aren't keeping the people in this state that we need to be keeping, the highly educated, job-creating individuals. Many of our children and our grandchildren go to college out of state and never return. Most of the people that work in West Virginia also do not work in the industries testifying up here today in favor of the bill. I want to speak about two of my friends who moved here from out of state. Husband and wife, one's a PhD, works in public policy. The other's a small business owner who ended up creating about almost half a dozen jobs in the agricultural sector, which is not an easy place to create jobs. When the water crisis happened, they felt it was indicative of the priorities of the state and of the leaders in the state, and immediately began seeking new job opportunities. It took some time. It's only a few weeks ago they finally got to a second interview, and we're on the fence about it. next weekend. We need to keep good people like them in this state, and please keep the law as strong as that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pepper. Charlie Bird, followed by Sam Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Charlie Bird. I'm very proud of being in my 13th year as the Executive Director of the Independent Oil and Gas Association. And I can say without any reservation that allowing the current Senate Bill 373 above ground storage tank act to continue would be detrimental to small independent producers in the state of West Virginia. The committee substitute for 423 will regulate oil and gas tanks 1,320 gallons or greater in both the zones of critical concern and those zones of peripheral concern. That is a massive amount of land to be guarded by the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. IOGA reaffirms its belief that oil and gas tanks contain salt and well and that are already subject to more existing regulatory programs do not present the risk of contamination to public water supplies. Actually, when I asked if he could identify any example of brine water or oil related to oil and gas production contaminating water supplies, Secretary of DEP stated that he was aware of no such example. While IOGA members remain committed to operating under provisions of the committee substitute for Senate Bill 423 as a superior alternative to the current bill, it also remains IOGA's opinion that tanks associated with oil and gas users should not come under the provisions of the AST Act. IOGA continues to advocate for a reasonable approach to protecting water supplies We urge the district committee to assess Senate Bill 423 as approved by the Senate. As presented, it addresses concerns of public water supplies, allows the DEP to devote its energy to regulating those tanks that pose a risk of contamination to public water supplies, and reduces many, but not all, of the unintended consequences resulting from the Freedom Industries release. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. How about Sam Hickman, followed by Brett Laughlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sam Hickman. I'm a social worker by profession. I was born and raised in Dunbar, West Virginia. My father worked at DuPont Bell Works plant for 40 years as a technical operator. His cars never seemed to be able to keep paint on them, and his coveralls always had holes burned in them. He died of cancer, I believe, because of exposure to the chemical industry. I remember evacuating the whole city of Dunbar because of a chemical leak at the Union Carbide plant just upstream. Last year, due to improper secondary containment and lax regulation and oversight, our water was poisoned for over 300,000 people. I drank some of that water before I knew what was going on. I then went to try and get some bottled water, and I saw the desperation and fear in the eyes of my fellow citizens, and the downright soulless anarchism and so on. The next morning, for the first time in my life, I had blood in my urine. I had skin irritation, I had respiratory distress, and I sought medical attention, of course. But I'm not worried about me. I have resources. I'm worried about the people, Mr. Chairman, who do not have resources and who are at universal now. Mr. Chairman, I implore you and your committee to approve this bill or to let it drain from your committee agenda without action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hickman. Brett Laughlin, followed by Julie Archer.
My name is Brett Laughlin. I'm here on behalf of the oil and gas industry in West Virginia. Oil and gas facilities and tanks are currently being regulated with statutory provisions Chapter 22.6, 22.6a, West Virginia Miscellaneous Water Pollution Control Rules, 35 CSR 1, and the requirements under Section 311 of the Clean Water Act, as well as a condition of existing permits. There is no provision in Senate Bill 423 that relieves oil and gas operators of already stringent and adequate regulations. I urge you to look at the facts that are written in the above reference statutes and regulations. Some of the existing requirements that you will find are spill notification consistent with the Federal Clean Water Act, spill prevention at each production facility. All tanks shall have appropriate secondary containment and/or diversionary structures or equipment to prevent discharged oil or other pollutants from reaching the waters of the state. Tank material must be compatible with the material stored. Tank and secondary containment inspections and maintenance on a scheduled basis is required.
required. New and old tank battery installations are required to be fail-safe engineered or updated into a fail-safe engineered installation to prevent spills utilizing one or more of the following. And then there's a long list, and I'll skip over that due to our time constraints. But those are just some of the existing requirements that oil and gas operators must comply with and have complied with for several decades. Senate Bill 423 is passed by the Senate, is protective of our state's public drinking water supplies without many of the unintended consequences of Senate Bill 373, which in effect will put companies out of business and our citizens out of work with no real additional environmental benefit. Thank you, Mr. Laughlin. Julie Archer, followed by John Hildreth.
Good morning. My name is Julie Archer, and I'm here today on behalf of the West Virginia Surface Owners' Rights Organization. And as one of the groups that was invited to participate in the stakeholder process that was initiated in the Senate around this bill, we acknowledge that the current version of Senate Bill 423 is better than the introduced bill. However, we are extremely disappointed that the bill still exempts tens of thousands of tanks, weakens inspection requirements for those tanks that would remain covered under the Act, and creates a loophole that would potentially allow tanks to be deemed compliant without meeting the tank integrity and other standards of the Act. So because of these concerns, we ask that you take a close look at which tanks would and would not be covered under Senate Bill 423 and strengthen the bill to ensure that tanks that pose a risk to water supplies are included. And that includes those tanks that could affect groundwater and the individual rural landowners that rely on private water wells for drinking and other uses. Additionally, requiring rigorous and explicit standards and accountability for tank and secondary containment integrity is key. And finally, Senate Bill 423 needs to explicitly require that modifications to existing permits or plans be as rigorous as the standards in the Act so as not to create a loophole. Please don't roll back water protections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Archer. John Hildreth.
Thank you, Mr.